Joe Blassberg, welcome, and thank you so much for giving us some of your time this afternoon. Please start off by sharing a little bit about how you got involved in college counseling.
Well, thank you for having me. I actually got involved with college counseling because I'm going to be very, very frank with you. I was a terrible student in high school. And, I just wanted to make sure that as I began my career in education, that I would work in a way that would ensure that students at least have the tools and the mechanisms to do the very best work that they could to really, I would say, to really capitalize on their strengths, work on their weaknesses, and I really just wanted to take them through that process. So, now I just find that college counseling and a big part of my job doing college counseling is also academic advising. I think those two are very good fits for me and how I want to help students.
Now, I know that you came to us. I know, as I mentioned in the intro, you're at the Green School now in West Palm Beach, Florida, but you came to us from some pretty prestigious schools in California. Tell us a little bit about what the California, whether it's a private school landscape or tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
Well, I actually, before I came to California, I was an admission officer. I was an associate director of admissions at American University in Washington, D.C. And I really enjoyed that work. But one of the things that was a bit of a drawback for me doing admissions work was that after an admission season was over, that was it. I didn't get to really work with the students anymore. I didn't get to see their progress. I didn't get to, just see them through to college graduation because we automatically had to begin another cycle again as soon as that one cycle was over. So I came into college counseling in California because part of my job at American University was to manage recruitment for the West Coast of the United States. And I became very involved with this one high school. It was the largest, at the time, the largest Jewish day school in the country. And I will admit there was a little bit of nepotism there, I guess, because the head of school, whom I used to visit every time I made a visit out to Los Angeles, she was actually a good friend of my cousin's, and she continually asked me if I would come and work at that school and help them with their college counseling program. And I'm very much an East Coast boy at heart, so I resisted for a while, but then she really pulled me in. So that's how my career in college counseling on the West Coast started. And they were a pretty new school, so not unlike Green, they actually were just starting out. They were really looking for someone to walk them through the process of college counseling. And their students were fantastic. It was a very ethically focused type of school, very service oriented. And also there were a lot of students because there was a science and technology academy there. They were very involved in engineering projects, in just really some cool science work with UCLA and other institutions in the Los Angeles area. So our students were getting into some really prestigious engineering programs. There was one year where we had like 10 students admitted to MIT.
Wow.
It was a really, really science-oriented school, but also had some great ethics and service components to it. So I really enjoyed that population. And then after that, another friend of mine came to Los Angeles, and she was actually an administrator at a school called the Buckley School, which happens to be the oldest independent day school in Los Angeles County. And they were very, very traditional. It was kind of like a complete 180. They were very traditional. They were very reading, writing, arithmetic. That's kind of what they were about. So I had experience in a very, very new school and a very, very established and traditional school. And when the Green School called on me, I thought this would be a great way to just kind of employ all of my failures, all of my successes, and everything that I learned through both of those experiences, I was able to bring to the Green School, and I've really enjoyed helping them build a new program here at Green.
That's fantastic. See, I've already pulled 2 teaching points out of your narrative. The first one, I think you've shown us twice. Nurturing your networks is very important because when you get out there in the professional world, who you know is very important, and the way you relate to people. So that's fantastic that you shared about the networks that you created and how that led to further opportunities. Yeah. I also like the last comment you made about employing all your failures and successes. Young people, they don't realize this, but I think when you switch a job, you get to recreate yourself a little bit in the way that you want to be. And I think that's very important, right? You have to take, I always think as a coach, failure is the only time a team learns, right? It's when you fail. But I really enjoyed the nurturing your networks stories there. I feel like that's important for our listeners to know, especially young people.
Well, I was going to add on about the failure thing too. I know that you mention all the time with the Wolfpack, and the students are doing these ridiculous experiences that we'll get to in a little bit here, but they're going to have to experience failure. And so many kids, I think, today have not had that opportunity to realize that you should expect it and you should embrace it, because it's through change that we all adapt.
Yes. And I think that that's very important. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable in front of my students either. I mean, I appreciate sometimes when they see me fail. And because I think failure is a way for all of us to learn, no matter what age we are. That's number one. And number two, I think what's most important about failure is the way you pick yourself up and recover. Right. And when my students can see me in the act of recovery, I think that's really, really important for them to witness.
Agreed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about, college counseling, the avenues of how we get to, college now seems to have changed. I mean, and it was really, I think, great that you've had experience at both a traditional school and a newer school. It used to be, at least when my kids were in the process of going to college, or maybe even me, that it was like, basically you just had to do well in school. You might have an extracurricular, or you were encouraged to, or maybe a job, and you had good SAT scores or something along those lines, as a year. So you did well, but that was enough to usually get in. Things have changed a lot in general in the past, probably 10 years, and certainly post-COVID. What are some of the things that you've really seen has become a challenge for students who are applying to college in the past few years?
Well, I will, let's start with the obvious and most recent first. Yes, I think COVID-19 changed, at the very least, the testing landscape for college. I'm sure most people know this. They probably read in the media and in other forms that colleges were really forced to change their testing policies. So most students throughout the country, and I'm also drawing on my experience in California as well, California especially, they were really prevented from taking either an SAT or an ACT. The testing centers just closed completely because they just couldn't be open for fear of, a super spreader event like an actual test, where, hundreds of students are sitting in the same room together. So colleges adapted by either going test optional. In the case of some colleges, they just went test free. They weren't even taking tests at all, even if the student was able to present them. So what ended up happening was, because they didn't have that piece in their application process, very fortunately for the college admission offices themselves, they were seeing students that they'd never seen before in their applicant pools. Students didn't have that barrier anymore of testing put up for them. So they were, quite frankly, getting a much more interesting pool of applicants, I think, and drawing from populations that they hadn't previously. So I don't know if test optional is not going to be sticking around anymore. I think it's working very much in the college's favor, because again, they are drawing a different type of population than in previous years. For students, I think it's a really good way for students to either showcase other qualities that they have if testing is not one of their fortes. And for students that do test well, they still can present a test if they want to, now that testing centers have opened up. So I really think that there is going to be this wave of most colleges remaining test optional, or some colleges even going test free, where they're not even going to be considering testing. However, we did just find out about a month or so ago, maybe a little more than a month now, that MIT has gone back to requiring a test. And of course, here in Florida, the University of Florida is still requiring testing for all of their applicants. So, I think the best way or the safest way to approach this whole testing landscape right now for students is take the SAT or the ACT, and then once a student decides where they're applying, they can see if they meet, the mid 50% ranges of testing for that particular school, and then they can either decide to submit the testing or not, depending on where they fall in the averages. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I want to ask you this, and I'll frame it the best way I can, but you take it in the direction that you need to. We've taught kids, and let's say they were outstanding middle school kids, they were hard chargers in high school, IB or whatever, and they apply for 3 kinds of schools, right? They have their stretch school, they have their, where they probably, and let's say they go for the MIT for the top, and they go for UF, for the
Likely.
probably. And I'm hearing, and maybe you can elaborate on this, that these top tier schools are getting rejection rates in excess of 90-95%. And these are qualified applicants, not just, C students that are applying. Would you say, as a counselor, we're at a place where, regardless of whether you get into the top tier or not, you're going to have to be good wherever you go, right? Like, is it more important to be a great student wherever you are, even not at the MIT, or is there still that luster and that you've got to go? And I'll let you take this question any way you'd like to go.
Well, first off, I would say we have to be really, really careful as a college-going population, not to let selectivity be a proxy for quality when it comes to a college education. Just because a college is highly, highly selected does not necessarily mean it's better or worse than any other colleges. I think really what I try to do in my counseling of students is lead them to the right fit. Harvard is a great institution, Stanford is a great institution, but it might not be a great institution for everyone. It really depends on whether you espouse the mission of that school. And that's one thing that, sorry, you told me I could take this anywhere I want.
Oh, that's great.
It just baffles me why so many people, when they go onto a college's website, when they're researching colleges, they just don't even click into the college's mission statement. That just baffles me, because to me, that is what the guiding principle of that college is. That guides everything from what type of student activities they have, that that guides what types of programs they're going to be offering, that guides even their hiring practices at that particular institution. So students really have to look at the mission statement, and if they do not espouse the values of that mission statement, they should probably not be applying there. I think that's really, really important. So that's my first bit of advice. Do not gloss over the mission statement. There are families and students I work with that don't even know colleges have a mission statement.
Oh, I'm sure that I'm one of them. I'm listening to this for the first time going, well, I know we didn't check out any of that. We're just looking at location and costs and programs, like for sure.
But that's important. And that mission statement is, there's not one person that creates that mission statement for the college. Usually the entire community at that college is involved in creating that mission statement. And it might go through several drafts before they authorize it.
Right.
So that's really important.
Right. Follow-up question. Does a university system like the state university system, does it have one mission statement? Because I see a lot of variability, at individual universities within a state system. Is there one collective mission statement, or does each institution have its own?
It depends. I think, probably at the top, whoever is leading that entire system, the whole system might have one mission statement, and then each campus might have their own as well.
Okay.
So
there's a lot of difference in, say, UF and FIU, or UF and USF or FAU. Yes. Okay.
Correct. So it might even give you an indication of the type of population that institution is serving as well.
Right.
So I think that's number one. I think what else is important when students are thinking about how to present themselves to college, it's just not about academics anymore. Students have to realize that colleges are not admitting students, they are curating a community. And one year they might want their community to look one way, and then the next year they might want it to look another way. And you're never going to know what the community has agreed upon for that particular year. That's not going to be something that's published. But it could be that you have straight A's, you might have a perfect SAT score, but that particular year they're looking for a particular type of student. And maybe a student that is kind of under the usual bar for that college will look more attractive to them because of certain qualities that they have. I will tell you that there are a couple of things now that we already talked about the testing landscape, but I'd like to go more into the dynamic landscape of the college. And I will tell you that most colleges now are concerned about two things. I mentioned one of them earlier about ethics, and I think that's really, really important to a college, is that students really have to have that ethical bent. They really have to present to a college what their contribution will be to the lifeblood of that college. It's not enough to just get good grades. You have to show, well, when I'm a student at this particular college, here is what I'm going to contribute to the life of the institution. So I think that's one thing, and it has to be community centered. I really think that's what colleges are looking for. The other thing, unfortunately, we are at a place in our society right now. I'm sure people have read about many instances of racism and sexual assault on college campuses. And I think colleges are really looking for students that have some sort of service orientation, some sort of global awareness, so that they can sort of lean into those conversations that are happening on campuses right now, because it's really important. Colleges are trying to produce students that are going to contribute to the world. And if you don't have that global outlook, if it's all well and good if you're you know, a great scientist, a great astronomer, if you're putting satellites up into space, you know, but if you're not doing anything good with those talents and with that knowledge, if you're not using that knowledge for good, then I really don't think that colleges, I know this sounds kind of harsh, but I don't think colleges are really going to care. You know, I think what they want is someone that's taking that type of a skill or a talent and bringing it to a more sophisticated and a higher level. And yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm listening to that, and it makes me think, you know, because, you know, on what we do with the Aerospace and Innovation Academy is really to provide what we hope are unique opportunities for students who want to maybe specialize in some way. In this case, it's the aerospace industry, which I didn't realize. I mean, I hear aerospace and I just think like, oh, okay, astronaut or engineer, right? But you know, it's an industry like anything else where you can, if you love law, you can do something in space and law. So I guess what I'm getting at is I'm starting to hear from, you know, parents who applied recently or, you know, concerns with exactly what you said, like the landscape has changed. Do you think that we'll continue to see a move towards, you know, kids who find a passion early on and are able to present almost like, I hate to call it a resume, but like a portfolio of these real world accomplishments in that area?
Oh, I think that's a fantastic way to approach anything. Any sort of passion, not just scientific passions, but writing, you know, just anything that a student's passionate about. And, you know, passion's a tricky thing because, you know, when I was a teenager, my passions were Oreos and video games, you know.
Mine still are.
But, you know, what was I going to do with that? And, you know, when I think of everything that's out there now, your program included, you could take any passion you have and do something great with it. You know, yeah. When I was growing up, we just didn't have that many resources available to us. You know, now I would be able to probably take those two passions and really put them to use in
right.
some way, shape, or form.
Am I wrong in hearing from you that, yes, you need passion, but the colleges may very well be interested in the motivations behind your passion?
I think right? That is a great, yes, that's a perfect way to put it. What is your motivation? What is your goal in doing this? And it should definitely not be to get into college.
Right, right. You know. And I just want to share, we did a podcast with this girl that you met recently through one of the networking. So she loves biology, particularly gardening, right? So it would be more in that area, but she also loves space. And she had all these things that she loved. And all of a sudden she's decided, she created a career for herself, essentially the idea of combining the psychological factors for living in space. Like what happens when, you know, when we're growing food and like the kind of food adds the nutrients that your brain needs to feel better and like emote all of that. And just listening to her, I was like, that's amazing. She took these two different areas, blended them in, and she's gonna be the first of her kind. It's something like that, you know, where you go, oh, I like all these things. Now, how can I make a difference with it?
Yes. And, you know, you're telling me that if she were to apply to Joe Blassberg University and I was reading that application, that would give me chills.
See? Yeah, me too. You know, just listening to her, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, because it seemed out of nowhere, right? Her mother's love of gardening carried on to her. How could she grow food to sustain life in another world, and at the same time combat all the psychological issues that people have?
That's exactly what, you know, when I talk about the college application, I talk about it as I use two, I guess they'd be metaphors. I talk about, you know, what is your story? What is the story that you want to tell to colleges? And that is something I begin to talk with students about very early on. You know, even in 8th and 9th grade, I will talk to them about, you know, think about the story that you want to tell by the time you are a senior applying to college. And that might be, you know, what guides you as you navigate high school.
You become that author then of your story.
Yeah, you are the author. This is an autobiography, exactly. And then the other thing I talk about with students, this is more when they're in the hands-on act of applying to college. I kind of make them think about their application as a jigsaw puzzle. And, you know, when we think about a jigsaw puzzle, all of the pieces are all mixed up. And then as we start to put the pieces together, you know, it might be a seascape. So, you know, one corner might be the sun and the sky, and the other corner might be a ship on the horizon. And then the other corner might be, you know, the seashore with a few shells. And then when you're finished with it and you look at it with an eagle-eye perspective, it creates a picture. It creates a whole picture. So all of those little pieces come together to create a big picture of who you are. And every piece of your story should fit in somewhere. And that's why I like for students to think about that story early on, because then they can begin to sort of create each of those pieces as they go through the high school.
I love that you're talking about it that way early on too. And I know that you and I have talked about this before. I think sometimes parents and maybe students too, you're right, they have this idea that it's only just the grades mean success, and that in middle school, it's if I don't do well here, then X, Y, or Z is going to happen. When in reality, you're just figuring out your story. You're just figuring out that storyline or that passion. And then that makes me think about when you're like, passions can be tricky. I'm not even sure I still know what mine is, right? I mean, I know what I have a skill set, right? I've learned that. And I've been able to find a passion because I was willing to try something completely, I thought, out of my wheelhouse, but adapted a skill for that. So that's the perfect time in middle school to start thinking about, I can try all kinds of things and figure out what it is that I love, so that I can write this story much more succinctly that way.
Yeah, it's all about exploration. And the great thing is, in whatever you're doing in middle school, by the time you get to be a ninth grader, the slate gets wiped clean.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
no matter how big it is, how low it is, or how big, you get to start again. The only difference is you start in middle school.
Colleges do not look at middle school grades. Now, that does not mean that what you're doing in middle school is not important.
Right.
That's right. Because in middle school, even though your grades won't be seen by colleges and universities, middle school is still important because you're developing foundational skills, you are developing study skills, you are beginning to, as I mentioned before, you're beginning to take note of what your strengths are so you can work toward your strengths. You're taking note of what your weaknesses are so you can work on your weaknesses. And all of that is really, really important to take with you at the high school level.
Right.
But nobody's going to ding you if you tried something and it just didn't work out, and you decided to reshift your focus or something like that. That's fine.
Right. Our experience has been that middle school is the ideal time for a child to learn about time management. Mm-hmm. Get the parents from bird dogging the kids and let them learn how to manage their time and their responsibilities. And I also think middle school is where they really can hone their soft skills, right? Those things that you don't have that meat grinder of high school getting into your right college. And I do agree with that. I want to say your metaphor, I'd never heard the jigsaw puzzle, but you reminded me of the swatches of cloth. You can take all the pieces of your life or like pieces of cloth. And even if a swatch is ugly, when it's sewn into the quilt can be beautiful, even if there's an ugly swatch here and there in it. And I think that's what our kids need to learn is, I think failures sometimes are the greatest stories they can tell. Mm-hmm. And I really resonated. What you said really resonated with me.
I'm actually glad you said that, because I often do essay workshops, college essay workshops. And one of the first things I tell students is, don't write about something that went right in your life. Write about something that went wrong in your life. If you write about something that went right, it's boring. There's no friction. There's no
conflict.
It's boring. If you just write about a vacation where everything was nice and you sat on the beach and you got a nice tan and then you went home, that's boring. Write about when you went on vacation and everyone in your family got sick. How did you handle that? What
Right.
did you do? What were your coping mechanisms that you employed? What type of positive psychology did you use to make the trip worthwhile? That's what a college wants to know is, what's your grit? What is it that you do to get out of a trouble spot?
That's your next book, Joe Blassberg.
Yeah.
What's your grit?
Oh, I've already bulletized your talking points into an outline for future use. So
Okay.
this is fantastic. I lost the battle with a kid where I thought he had a great story to tell that should have been his college essay, and he went in a different direction. But we went to Beijing, China. We had 11 Americans and 275 Chinese kids, and they were broken into 3 companies. And he volunteered to run for president of one of the companies. We're in Beijing, China, and he is running against a Chinese kid for president of a company. And everyone that can vote for him, except for his 10 little American friends, are all Chinese. He almost won, and it was the eve of the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party in China. I'm like, dude, you're an American running with a Chinese audience, and you almost won the Democratic election. I said, that essay, that's powerful, even though he lost. But I totally get that. I thought that was such a unique set of circumstances where he did not win, but man, what a story. It was a win, right? So I'm really glad we're out of time, and I'm really glad that you were able to. I thought these talking points were fantastic. I'm just going to reiterate to you, I really like the idea about nurturing your networks and find the university mission statement. I thought those were two brilliant things that we got out of today.
And I always end, with what kind of advice you have. And I think you've covered a lot with that, but I think if you have any words that maybe for our audience is mostly our parents, our students, and maybe some, teachers who are interested in engineering, maybe who are engineering in focus, and maybe they're all about that kind of path. What advice do you have for our parents today about what they can best do to nurture their student throughout the process, whichever it is that they choose?
Well, not being an engineer myself at all. In fact, that is so outside of my wheelhouse. I always think of engineering as, if I were to define it in a very, very simple term for someone like me, for a layperson like me, to me, engineering is just finding solutions to life's problems. And I think for engineering students, if they are not in it with that particular purpose in mind, then I think they have to rethink whether they want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
I've heard of students that are in it for the money. They're in it because they want to, create an app that, will just make them tons of money, and that's it, that they can sell. And, if you are not in it to help find solutions, then I just think you need to find another career path, quite frankly.
I think that's perfect. It reminds me of my son, who this weekend said, he one of his reasons for going into aero engineering, I hope he doesn't listen to this when he edits it, that he wanted to create a suit like Iron Man. And I was like, okay.
Well,
but I'm very all right, and I think he was partially joking, but I don't know. There's a passion there nonetheless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, sorry, if I could just tie it to college as well.
Yeah.
I think most engineering schools, when their admission offices are reading a student's application, I think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that student that is trying to solve problems for humanity.
No,
Yes.
Really good themes. Mm-hmm. We want to thank you so much for spending some time. I hope that you'll come back with us again. I'm already making a list of things I need to come talk to you about on Monday, because I'm going to be hosting like a resume writing workshop for a webinar really for some of our students. And I really love the idea that you do these college writing essay workshops. So I might have to pick your brain a little bit, or have you come and join me at some point.
Okay.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.